Oh, good morning, San Bernardino, Riverside, the Inland Empire, Rancho Cucamonga. I love saying Rancho Cucamonga, and Loma Linda, California. And good afternoon and good evening to those listening to us on the live stream link. Today, my guest is Jasmine Tyler. She is the Deputy Director of National Affairs for the Drug Policy Alliance. So we're going to talk about drugs today, and I'm going to do something a little different. Usually I give my little spiel in the beginning, but today we're going to go straight to my guest because we only have her for the half hour, and we're lucky to have her for that. So, and then after she leaves, I'll open up the phone line so that we can have open lines and people can call in and talk about anything they'd like to talk about. So let's get straight to my guest, Jasmine Tyler. Hello, Jasmine.
Hello, it's nice to be on the air this morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, I'm delighted to have you. I've spoken with you before. We did an interview for Huffington Post, but I wasn't able to get it posted for whatever reason. I can't remember to be exact. But I'm glad I have you now. So let's talk about drugs, folks.
Let's talk substance, so, I like to say.
Yeah. So, Jasmine, tell me, what does the Drug Policy Alliance do generally, and what do you do specifically?
Well, the Drug Policy Alliance is the nation's leading organization working to end the war on drugs. We really envision a new drug policy that's formulated and grounded in science, compassion, health, and human rights. In society right now, we're missing that as a part of our drug policy, and we need to inject some rational thought into it. I work here in Washington, D.C., and work to lobby and change federal laws pertaining to drug policy.
So talk to me about specifically, you gave a speech last month at the U.S. Sentencing Commission, and what were you addressing?
Well, last month at the beginning of June, the Sentencing Commission held a hearing on whether or not they should make the Fair Sentencing Act retroactive for those who are still incarcerated in the Bureau of Prisons. For your listeners who don't know, the Fair Sentencing Act was the legislation that was passed a year ago that reduced significantly the 100-to-1 sentencing disparity between crack cocaine and powder cocaine. It was reduced to 18-to-1. And the original sentencing regime was excessively harsh, and the African-American community bore the brunt of the sentencing policy. In fact, 82% of those who are incarcerated for crack cocaine federally are African-American, yet only make up one-third of the users of crack cocaine. So it was monumental that the Sentencing Commission was willing to have a hearing on making this legislation retroactive, because it's not fair to sentence someone the day after the bill is signed to one sentencing structure, while those who have proven year after year that the original sentencing structure was unjust continue to languish. So I was there to provide testimony and urge them to do the right thing, which I'm very happy to announce. Later in the month, they voted unanimously to apply retroactive application, and that will affect 12,000 individuals over the next 30 years and will save taxpayers about $240 million in prison costs.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, so congratulations on
Thank
that.
you.
On that success. But, let's talk about, are we having some feedback? Let's talk about some broader issues, like the fact that the war on drugs has disproportionately impacted black and brown communities. In fact, it has raged like a forest fire in the black community and brown community. Let's talk specifically about why did that happen, why is that happening, and why don't enough Americans know about that fact?
Well, I think this is one of the most important reasons to talk about the war on drugs, because you hit the nail on the head. The reality is the war on drugs is really a war on black and brown communities, and that's why I work here at the Drug Policy Alliance. I believe wholeheartedly in the book that Michelle Alexander recently published titled The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness, in which she says, really, the drug war is the new guise after the civil rights gains to continue to create and maintain a second-class citizenship or a caste system for people of color in the United States.
So it is operated as a caste system. In fact, I saw some stats that said last year in New York City, 90% of the people arrested for weed/marijuana in New York City were black and brown folks. How does that kind of thing happen?
Well, ironically enough, in New York, marijuana is decriminalized, but because of the policing practice, and this is where a lot of the racial disparities are generated, because it's the enforcement of the drug laws that is unleashed disproportionately on communities of color. Public health data from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration shows us that all ethnic groups use drugs at the same rate. But that's not what you find when you start looking at our criminal justice system and look at arrests and convictions and sentencing lengths. And so you're right. In New York, almost 85% of the marijuana arrests have been black and Latinos. And every year, these arrests are costing $75 million. And by and large, they're falling on youth as well. So 70% of those are between the ages of 16 and 29. So we're systematically excluding from society, our young population.
Mm-hmm. And you say 85%, and I read a study that said 90%. So basically, this drug war, in fact, it was started, the drug war, 30 years ago by Reagan, and it started at a time when drug was on the decline, drug use was on the decline, and so basically this drug war has been a political tool, a political mechanism, as opposed to about controlling drug crimes. Would you agree with that assessment?
You're absolutely right. It's ironic that our Office of National Drug Control policy and their national drug control strategy are absent any type of control because they lack regulation. In fact, it feeds everything to a prohibition model, which, as we know from the alcohol prohibition days, just doesn't work. The drug war was launched actually 40 years ago in 1971. The anniversary was last month by President Nixon, but you're right, it was certainly ramped up by President Reagan. And initially, I will say this, President Nixon made sure that there was money available for treatment. But the problem was the war language and the goals that were around, as I said earlier, enforcement, really skewed the approach that would continue over the next 40 years. And we shouldn't think that was the first time that our drug laws had anything to do with or were based in racialized analyses. In fact, the cocaine codes, the heroin laws, and the marijuana laws from the earlier part of the 1900s all stem in racialized ideology. With marijuana, it was because of agricultural workers vying for jobs as Dust Bowl American white farmers were challenging Mexicans for agro-business. And on the West Coast, the heroin and opium codes were created because of Chinese railroad workers, but certainly weren't addressing the white women who were addicted to pain medication that were based in opiate derivatives. And then, of course, you have the fear of the emancipated slave and the cocaine codes that were created after emancipation.
So essentially, our drug laws have worked as a form of racial control.
Absolutely. And when you throw on top of it disenfranchisement from the right to vote on top of all of that, then you really get to understand the caste system, because currently there are 5.3 million Americans who are unable to vote because of a felony conviction, but 2 million of those individuals are African American, and I don't have to tell you that the majority of those individuals fall below the Mason-Dixon over here on the East Coast.
And so in 30 years, our prison population has exploded, essentially. It was $30,000. What am I talking about? But it is money, because that's what I'm talking about. It is money, because our prisons are becoming privatized. We have a few privatized now. We're going to get more privatized soon, so it's appropriate to talk about dollars and cents, but what I wanted to touch on was the fact that 30 years ago we had 300,000 prisoners, and today we have more than 2 million prisoners. And most of that increase is due to drug convictions. Would you?
You're right. Certainly in the federal prison system, since 1980 to date, the prison system has increased over 700%, and the federal budget that accompanies that has increased 1,800% to accommodate it. These systems are out of control, and my own Senator Jim Webb says it best, I think, and he says, either we have the worst citizens of any country in the world, or we're just doing it wrong. And I believe wholeheartedly we are really just doing it wrong. In California, you all know about the prison overcrowding crisis out there. The Supreme Court made a historic decision in decrying the medical neglect and severe overcrowding of the California prison system. And now today you have more than 6,000 prisoners who are on a hunger strike in 13 prisons in response to the lack of action by the California administrators. And so there really is a crisis brewing in the states and at the federal level.
So now talk to me about the specifics. Talk to me about the specific differences and give me examples between how crack cocaine is punished and sentenced and how powder cocaine is punished and sentenced.
Sure. So crack cocaine up until a year ago was punished 100 times more harshly than powder cocaine in the federal system, which led to very excessive sentences for 5 grams of crack cocaine, which is the equivalent of 2 sweet and low packets. Someone would get a 5-year mandatory minimum sentence, and for 50 grams, the equivalent of a Mr. Goodbar-sized candy bar, would get a 10-year mandatory minimum sentence. It took 500 grams of powder cocaine to trigger the 5-year sentence, and it takes 5,000 grams or 5 kilos of powder cocaine to trigger the same 10-year sentence. So we're talking very extremely skewed sentences, and again, I'll just say, everyone knows you need powder to make crack. It's unclear why the goal was to punish the back-end product more excessively than the front-end product. But, I'll have to say, the states sort of got this right. No state replicated a disparity as extreme as the federal government created in the late 80s. And so you have a handful of states, or maybe 2 handfuls of states, maybe about 10 states or so, who continue to maintain a disparity between the two forms. But the disparity that's maintained is significantly smaller.
Like what, for instance? What
the ratios are calculated in different ways, and I unfortunately don't have that report in front of me. But many of the states don't have such excessive penalties for the higher quantity. For the lower quantity triggers. And that's really the problem here is that law enforcement, both on the state and the federal level, have really been diverted by forcing them to focus on low-hanging fruit, the easy busts on the corner, as opposed to really getting at the heart of the problem and reducing availability. And again, that's a problem with the prohibition model.
So talk to me about the distinction between the federal and the state level in terms of when someone has been convicted of an offense or been swept under the laws or been found guilty. How does it happen? Like, what is a scenario that makes it where a person will be channeled into the federal offense or the state offense?
Well, that's an interesting question that you raise, and it really brings into light the fact that our criminal justice systems in the last 30, 40 years have been skewed, and judicial discretion has been greatly reduced, while prosecutorial discretion has been increased through the use of mandatory minimum sentences. So you have prosecutors who are then making the choice to charge cases in certain ways, as opposed to leaving it up to a judge's discretion, a legal professional who has practiced for, a very long period of time, who has been vetted by colleagues to assume that role of decision maker. And so in both the state and the federal level, many times prosecutors and drug task forces, which are, policing units that are put together. Sometimes they are state policing units, either on the local level or on the state level, that receive federal funding to go after drug sales, or they are groupings of federal and local law enforcement who work together. And so they will many times make decisions, and unfortunately, a lot of times they practice their roles in bad faith. So you'll have an instance where someone, say the two of us, I'm the undercover agent, and I'm trying to sell to you or trying to buy from you, and I'll say, hey, listen, I want to get some cocaine, and you're like, okay, I'll get you some cocaine. How about next week? And so we say that's fine, and I call you the day before, and I say, actually, you know what, Kathleen, I want you to cook that up for me. And then you get an increased penalty because at this point you've now provided crack cocaine instead of the powder cocaine that was originally asked for. So there are a lot of problems in the conspiracy laws that also accompany the drug prohibition laws that lead people to be exposed to greater numbers of charges and to greater lengths of sentence.
Okay, I'm going to give out the call-in number because I know you have to go at the half hour, and maybe some people want to call in and ask you a question. So the call-in number, toll-free, is 1-888-909-1050, and the local number is 909-888-5222. I encourage people to call in, and actually, if you have questions about the drug policy or if you have questions about mass incarceration, my guest today is Jasmine Tyler, who is the Deputy Director of National Affairs for the Drug Policy Alliance. So I encourage people to call in. So you mentioned, Jasmine, the book that Michelle Alexander has written. I think we both have read that. And in that book, she concludes that the drug war has been and this is something I think we actually already touched on, has created an undercaste system, and because of the fact that once a person is labeled a felon, once someone has been convicted and labeled a felon, they are precluded from participating in society in sort of like normal ways. They're precluded from voting and getting public housing, and so on and so forth. Talk to me about your experience in seeing people being labeled a felon.
Well, it's the criminal label is really, really detrimental to reentering society and being a productive member of society. Almost at every point of contact with society, people who are formerly convicted or have been formerly imprisoned face collateral consequences and are hindered from participating in professional, civic, and economic development and other opportunities. And many times they're the very basic issues that need to be addressed in life, for instance, obtaining employment, obtaining housing, obtaining public benefits to ensure that your needs are being met, are restricted for people who have drug convictions. And I touched on the voting rights issue, and certainly that is the most glaring example of what the criminal label means to creating the undercaste system, because, a large group of people literally have no more political voice after they've already served their debt to society. It's outrageous that we would continue to punish people. It's like a double jeopardy issue. People continue to be punished long after they have, as I mentioned, served their debt to society through any form of a prison sentence. And that's why marijuana arrests are really, really important to understand, because while many individuals think, oh, well, it's just a marijuana arrest, they're not going to go to prison for a long period of time, that's certainly That's certainly true, but the problem is this arrest record and conviction record will stay with you for the rest of your life, and so it's become, what may have been a small, low-level marijuana arrest becomes a life sentence to an undercast system. And so I've been saying recently that marijuana arrests are really the new crack disparity, again, because they're refocusing law enforcement resources on low-level nonviolent offenses and distracting them, and because the brunt of the enforcement falls on the African American and Latino communities, and then third, because of the sheer cost.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So they're actually targeting these communities. So, I mean, you said that marijuana is decriminalized in New York City, and yet we're having marijuana arrests. How does that happen?
Well, that happens because of a stop and frisk policy that's in effect in New York City under the guise of public safety. But what you have is decreasing public safety because of the interruption in lives of these people who live every day in a community that has to continue to thrive in some way. And so, these marijuana arrests, what typically happens is that an officer will stop an individual and say, hey, listen, you need to pull everything out of your pockets or out of your purses, and because if I find it, then I'm going to arrest you. And so individuals think, oh, well, okay, marijuana is decriminalized here in New York City, so I have a small bag of marijuana in my purse, or I have a joint in my book bag, and they pull it out, and then the police subsequently arrest them because they've displayed their marijuana in public. And so this is a very tricky way to arrest a large group of people who are not causing any harm to public safety, and for whom the majority of these cases, and I mean a high majority, I don't have the number in front of me, this is the most serious offense that is potentially arrestable. It's the marijuana violation. I mean, these are not people who have, intentions on, terrorizing a city or causing some kind of or participating in some kind of violent outburst or crime. I mean, these are people who are walking and going about their lives every day.
Mm-hmm. So, in other words, the crime is opening marijuana in public, exposing it in public.
Absolutely. Exactly.
That's a crime. So how has President Obama, I know that he has embraced the Edward Byrne Memorial Grant Program. Are you familiar with that program?
I am. Unfortunately, the Byrne JAG program is very well known for perpetuating a number of civil rights abuses, many that occurred in Texas, wherein large groups of African Americans in small communities were incarcerated and charged with very high-level drug crimes, and were all, or a majority of them were all eventually pardoned or released.
Okay, well, we're at the half hour. I know that I want to thank you, Jasmine, for taking the time to join me today for the show, and I want to have you back again for the full hour because I think this is an important issue, and I'm just sort of disheartened that the American people haven't taken up this issue. A large swath of our population is incarcerated. So thank you, Jasmine, for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, and I would love to join you again.
Okay, thanks
Bye
again.
now.
Bye. So, what we're going to do is we're going to take a break. We're at the half hour, and this is the Kathleen Wells Show, and I'm Kathleen, and thank you very much. We'll be right back with Open Phones. Welcome back. This is the Kathleen Wells Show, and I'm Kathleen. We just spoke with Jasmine Tyler, who is the Deputy Director of National Affairs for the Drug Policy Alliance, and we were talking about mass incarceration. This is an important topic. Now we're going to go into open phone lines. So I'm going to give out the toll-free number, which is 1-888-909-1050, and the local number is 909-888-5252. I encourage people to call. This is open phone lines, and you can talk about anything you like. And we're going to take our first call from Ed from Delaware. Hi, Ed.
Hi.
So
how you doing?
How are you doing? What would you like to say, Ed?
Well, I was curious to know. I'm in Delaware, of course, and the thing that's going on in Wisconsin with all the recalls, it amazes me that no media is really covering this. and this is unprecedented what's going on there. I just want to know what you felt about the situation and why is it not getting the coverage that it deserves, because I'm assuming it's because the action is being done by predominantly white people, and they don't want to show that nationally that white people are upset with the Republican government that's going on in Wisconsin.
Oh, my gosh. Well, you know what? I did see on the Ed Schultz Show and Lawrence O'Donnell on MSNBC last night them discussing the thing. You're talking about the fact that they're doing the voter recall, or are you talking specifically
Correct.
about...
Recall.
Yeah.
The whole situation there is unprecedented. I've never seen it anywhere else in my lifetime.
Tell me specifically, are you talking about the fact that they had the recall and they had these fake Democrats put on the ballot? And
all that's going on, yes.
Yeah, well, you know what? I did hear that. I heard that on the TV yesterday on MSNBC. Then I also heard it on talk radio with Tom Hartman this morning driving into the station. So I think there has been some media coverage of that issue. Quite a bit, actually. I've been hearing... You don't have your TV on? You're listening to me on the radio, right?
Right.
So I don't know if it's a racial issue. I mean, I think the racial issue is our criminal justice system.
Right.
You know what I mean? To say that
right.
this thing that's going on in Wisconsin is racial, I mean, I think that's kind of
well,
stretch.
I didn't mean it in that term. I'm just saying the fact that it's I lived in Chicago and I used to go to Wisconsin in the summertime, and the state is predominantly white, and it's just unprecedented that large numbers of white people are upset with the government in their state, and it took a while for it to get national attention, and that was my thing. It was just like they were afraid to put that out there, that it was, large numbers of white people protesting. Now, there were blacks there, but it just amazed me that they were like, they're handling it with kid gloves when what I see, that's unprecedented. I've never seen...
You haven't been watching because, listen, Rachel Maddow has been going over this like gangbusters.
But MSNBC is the liberal, our hub. But, I mean, just in general, all the other stations are like, well, I'm not going to talk about that.
Oh, well, see, I can't comment on that because I don't watch the other stations. I primarily focus on progressive liberal talk shows and radio shows, and I know they've been covering it. In fact, I sat in for Roseanne Barr probably a month ago, a little longer, and that's when the whole thing started happening with the Wisconsin collective bargaining rights and the law and so on and so forth. And I discussed that, and I know a lot of people are aware of it. I'm just, I hear what you're saying, though. Do you know what I mean? But I don't think it's racial. I think you're not watching enough TV.
Right.
Is there anything else you want to discuss?
No, that does it.
Okay, that does it. Ed, thank you for calling. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me.
Okay, you're very welcome. And I'm going to give out the call-in number again, toll-free, 1-888-909-1050. We have open phones. And today I have a call from Jack in Sacramento. He wants to talk about our guest, Jasmine Tyler. Hi, Jack. How are you?
I'm fine, Kathleen. I would like to make a comment as she brought some very good points up. Let's put it that way. There's so much that could be said about it, but I don't see where she has any solutions to the problem, although the problem is, in my opinion, immense, and there's not one solution. It's an extremely large problem, and granted, the black population and brown, as both of you have stated, are targeted. And I presume, rather than presume, I would think that the reason for that is those particular populations are concentrated in a very in a ghetto area, as the word ghetto means. Whereas the white population may indeed be larger perpetrators of the problem, but they're not concentrated in any one particular area. The other reason is that if you think about, let me put it another way. My own opinion is that I'm not sure whether it were the blacks, but my own opinion is that the whites addicted the black population. At this point in time, I believe the black population is benevolent to the black dealers who are supplying them with the drugs. But again, the black population within those ghettos, one of the reasons, I can attest to this, I was a pretty big drinker, alcoholic, and drinking and getting drunk, I never did drugs, is a way of escaping everyday reality. Doing drugs, in my opinion, is a way of escaping reality. The black population, brown population, whatever, they, in particular, lack the opportunity that the upper middle class whites may have. Now, the people forget that the white population consists of a larger percentage of whites who are on welfare than blacks. They're never mentioned. Now, whether their drug problems are as prevalent, I don't know, because they're not mentioned in the media.
Well, the drug use, illegal drug use, is the same percentage across the board for all groups. So that just throws that out of the water, right?
Well, I don't know where that particular statistic would come from, but again...
Well, it's accurate, because
I don't know whether it is or not. My point being is that I agree. The black population, I'm not black, I'm white, but the black population, brown population, for many, many primarily economic reasons, they turn to drugs. I don't know whether more so than whites. I couldn't say.
It's not more so. Listen,
all right, well, okay.
We've done the research. We've looked at the book. We've read Michelle's book. You're just talking off the top of your head. You don't know.
No, I don't know. But
so why can't? Well, you're making statements that you don't know. You're just surmising.
I'm not making any statement. My statements happen to be qualified when I say I don't know.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes it okay.
Okay, my statements are not concrete. I'm telling you I don't know.
Yeah, well, you know what I want to recommend to you, Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow: Mass Incarceration in the Age of Color Blindness.
Well, I'm listening to the woman, and she sounds extremely on top of what she's talking about, but where are the solutions? Where do the solutions come from? They're not going to come from the white elites. And people forget that the white people, for the most part, are not the elites. The elites are the people that run the whites, the blacks, the yellows, the browns, you name it. And these are people, many of them, who are, they're at the top of the food chain, okay? And many of these people, if you start doing a little research, profess to be what might be called liberal, which is thrown around pretty good, and profess to be looking out for the downtrodden, and it's quite contrary, they're not. So where do you solve this problem? Where do you begin? Who knows? But again, I agree with the woman, and I agree with the entire conversation that we have a major problem, and the thing is where do you begin to solve it? Is it going to be solved in schools? Hell no, it's not, because they're dumbing down both, you name it, they're dumbing down all the kids.
Right. Well, Jack, I only had 30 minutes to talk with Jasmine Tyler with the Drug Policy Alliance, and I think she does have solutions, and I think she does have solutions, because I read her speech that she gave to the U.S. Sentencing Commission last month. So she's working on the problem, but I hear what you're saying, that it's not necessarily a white person, or it's not racial necessarily, that's your position, and it's not necessarily Democrats versus Republicans, it's just a problem in and of itself. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's a problem. I've done enough reading, what have you. My opinion is that this problem was perpetrated, manufactured, and...
manufactured by who?
By who? I will say the white elitists, okay?
The white elitists for what reason?
And for what purpose?
Yeah.
For control.
Control of what?
Control of a population.
And what population?
Well, at that point in time, it was control of the black people.
Oh, you agree with us. Thank you, Jack, for calling.
I agree with that.
You agree with our premise. Thank you very much, Jack, for calling. We're going to take Sean McDonald from Los Angeles now, and he wants to talk about the jury process. Hi, Sean.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning.
Good morning.
Got a question in a quasi statement. The question is that based on the author's research, one thing I guess is hard to quantify is that in the jury process, the jury pool, people are bringing their prejudices, preconceived notions, bigotry to the courtroom with them, and also the judge. So when you couple these things with the actual alleged crime and the race makeup of the alleged, how does she believe that you can derive at some measure of what we quote unquote a fair and unbiased judgment?
Oh, well, that's an interesting thing that you bring up. You know why? Because the Casey Anthony verdict was delivered last week, right? She was found not guilty. And we know that jurisdiction where she was found not guilty has a 95% conviction rate. So my question is, who are these other people that are being convicted?
Thank you.
Why are prisons...
That was a mind-boggling verdict to me, too.
It was a mind-boggling verdict, but that jurisdiction where the trial was held has a 95% conviction rate. So who are these people convicting? That's the question. Who are they convicting? Not Casey Anthony.
Correct.
Now, so I think that the standard beyond a reasonable doubt is a very high standard, and I'm not going to question the jurors on that one. I think that's a difficult one to meet. But when you've got a 95% conviction rate in a jurisdiction and the woman is found not guilty, and these people are convicted on circumstantial evidence because most cases are decided on circumstantial evidence, and then our prisons are filled with black and brown folks, you know who's being convicted. You just connect those dots.
Yep.
So I have always taken the position, and I'll always take the position until it changes, is that our criminal justice system is very racist. I don't know. I mean, I don't even have to say very. I'll just say racist, because racist is just racist. You don't have to say very, very racist.
Correct.
So our criminal justice system is racist, and I think it behooves all Americans to wake up to this fact, develop awareness, and work to make this not a reality. Because that racism in the criminal justice system, it spills over into everything. Because as Jack, my previous caller, was saying, poor white kids are arrested too, with those mandatory sentences. So and then
that, but when you're tying, I guess it's kind of hard to, think the act of racism also from the monetary and financial gain.
Wait, repeat that, Sean.
Privatization, right?
Wait, repeat that, Sean.
It's difficult when we've got a system that's been in place, at least in this country, for the better part of, as long as the country's been in existence, that's 276 years. Mm-hmm. That money drives much of the policy and the laws that are written in this country, right?
Exactly.
And this is a multi-billion-dollar industry, the prison industrial complex, and the branches which feed off of it. So, being it is us that's going to jail, being sentenced to long bid, who financially is benefiting by maintaining the status quo in the way that the laws are enforced and administered?
Oh, definitely. I mean, with the war on drugs, as I mentioned before, I may have mentioned, I don't remember, but when that war on drugs was announced by Reagan, actually Nixon kind of sort of talked about it. Reagan instituted it. When that was instituted, drug use was on a decline. And so police jurisdictions, police departments weren't even interested in, in putting forces into a war on drugs because drug use was on a decline. So the Reagan administration gave financial incentives to make police officers trump up the war on drugs. He actually paid them to do it.
Wow.
So, I mean, it's, undoubtedly this is corruption and this is money, and the prison industrial complex is a complex that has money that is privatizing our prisons. And who's going to fill up those prisons? So we're ruining our, populations, communities, so that people in a certain community can work in a prison?
Yes, essentially what's taking place, right?
Yeah, okay.
And as this economy continues to spot downward, what do you think is going to happen to that prison population? You think it's going to decrease?
No, well,
the more unemployed people that we've got, right?
Right.
If they're going to start looking toward other means to supplement their income, and typically those other means are going to typically be illegal.
Okay, so thank you, Sean. I think we're going to take a break right now, and this is the Kathleen Wells Show. My name is Kathleen. We'll be right back. Thanks, Sean. Welcome back. This is the Kathleen Wells Show, and I'm Kathleen. We did a little different format this morning because my guest had to leave at the half hour. So we had my guest first, and I didn't do my spiel. So my spiel today is going to be the debt ceiling. Now, I know we have all seen this on the news, and we're all sort of like anxious about it or whatever. Yesterday, President Obama put the country on notice that he cannot guarantee that Social Security and other government checks will go out if the debt ceiling isn't raised by October. Why do I keep saying October? By August 2nd. We have a debt of $14.29 trillion. The Republicans have raised the debt ceiling, 7 times under Bush? So, what is this thing about Reagan and Bush lovers who just love to blame Obama for increasing the debt? I mean, is that something like Rush Limbaugh is talking about that on his morning radio program? Oh, they're just bashing Obama. Yet, under Bush, under Reagan, we raised the debt. So what's the problem? Reagan started his first term with 32.5% of the GDP being debt and finished with 53.1%. An increase of 20.6% in 8 years, almost doubling the debt. It went up 66.1% at the end of Bush Sr.'s reign, an increase of 15%. Under Bush Jr., he increased the debt on his watch by 27%. So, what's the story? I think I've talked to you guys before about being too partisan. Just because someone has a D or an R next to their name, don't be reactionary and just react like, oh my God, they're like the, Attila the Hun. This is how people are treating Obama, as if the debt ceiling hasn't been raised before. So why are we being so reactionary and knee-jerk? And when we're too partisan like that, who suffers? The American people. The American people suffer when we're too partisan. Thank you very much. And I want to say thank you for joining me today. This is Kathleen Wells, the Kathleen Wells Show. And we'll see you next Wednesday. Be co-creative. Thanks again. Bye.